10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Look, up in the sky, it's a bird.
It's a plane!
There's no need to fear.
I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, cause I'm black.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Super Black, an all-black panel podcasting experience where we talk about all things superhero, past, present, and future. From Marvel and DC to anime, there is no stone we will leave unturned as we take a deep dive into the genre of superpowered individuals and the worlds they inhabit. I am your friendly neighborhood host, Zuri Washington. I use she, her pronouns, and you can follow me on IG at Zuri with a fringe on top. That's Zuri with a Z, not Suri with an S. I'll leave it to the rest of today's super panel to introduce themselves. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Omar. You can catch me on Twitter at copyright or on IG at original with an O, with a zero, underscore gamester. I'm here to talk about comics, comic book movies, the characters that are in them, and just have fun doing it.
Hello, I'm Sheridan. My pronouns are she, her, and you can follow me on Instagram at Island Zephyr Cooks if you're into plant-based food.
She made a really good curry like a couple weeks ago. You guys should go look at it.
It was real good.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jamal James. You can follow me on Instagram at the Jamal James. I'm an actor and fellow geek about all things superheroes and ready to talk about them.
Hello, Rolls Andre, OG fanboy, not a techie, as you can tell. Actor extraordinaire. I've been collecting comics since the Bronze Age. So you know, I go back. I go back a little bit. You can follow me on Instagram, Rollsie, ROLLSIE.
Hey, it's Richard Harden in Atlanta. I usually talk about the ultimate superpower, money. By the way, it's Financial Awareness Month, if you hadn't paid attention. I have been a comic book enthusiast and part-time superhero for most of my life, and I think we're going to have a blast today. Oh, my pronouns, they're he and him. All my stuff is his, except some of the stuff I share with her. That's there. On Instagram at Richard_Harden.
And don't forget to follow the podcast itself at Super Black Podcast on IG, or you can follow us on Twitter at Super Podcast. Now that we are all assembled, let's get started. So today we're going to talk about the relationship between race and the X-Men. There's a lot of, over the years, there have been a lot of comparisons made. I know that we talked to Kwanzaa, the writer of Black, about he does not agree with the notion that Malcolm X is aligned with Magneto and that Martin Luther King Jr. is aligned with Professor X. But there have been plenty of people who have seen very many similarities. And of course, the X-Men are so persecuted and have been so maligned throughout their history in the comic books that people see a very easy correlation to specifically Black people's struggle, but many marginalized communities. Struggles in the United States. So let's get started talking about it. I know this was a topic that interested you specifically, Rich. There's an article that came out, I think it was in 2019. I looked at it this morning, 2019, that specifically was talking about the history behind it. Do you want to give a little background on your thoughts on that?
Well, absolutely, especially in perspective, because of course, being born and raised in Atlanta, child of the civil rights movement, it was easy to get back information about what happened. So if you think about it, both Black Panther and the X-Men were like 1966 originals, if I'm not mistaken. So it was written right in the middle of the civil rights movement and the era. And Stan Lee and his other editor have already said they got a lot of their inspiration for framing the conflict between Professor Xavier and Magneto as comparisons or offshoots from Malcolm X and Martin. You know, one with the idea. I mean, obviously, the X-Men aren't non-violent; they're violent as hell. But in a way of, you know, evolving the idea of Homo superior as allies with the regular Homo sapien human race, and working for peaceful existence alongside one another, where Magneto was like, us first, right? Us first, our power. And even, I mean, I wish I had the older article, because I saw something about this many years ago. I actually wrote a paper on it back when I was in college in the late 1900s. Where it was literal lines, you know.
You made me
Right.
feel old when you said that. I'm sorry, because that wasn't that long ago. I had to think about it. But go ahead.
I can't.
But just thinking about that, now here's the interesting thing: for them to have done so much paralleling in race, the other thing the 2019 article talked about was how few Black mutants got to stay around in their original version. Like, if you think about what the original X-Men looked like, that first, they were the whitest of white. Like, it was
right. With that original 5 was Iceman, Cyclops,
Angel,
Beast, Angel, and Jean Grey,
Jean
right?
Grey.
That was
Marvel
5.
Girl.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that was
Marvel Girl. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was.
Yeah.
Well, that was the whole reason behind the X-Men in the 70s. They're like, how about we make a group of people from other countries? And if you read that first giant size X-Men, it is such a mess. It is like everybody is their stereotype. Like everybody's like, you know, like, and she's like, top of the morning to you. And like, you know, like they're all just so corny, you know. But they eventually humanized them. They made them really wonderful.
Well, I think
Isn't the stereotype?
Oh, sorry. You go.
I was gonna say, isn't the stereotype? Isn't that kind of? It was across the board, right? So with comics,
all
so
of them.
even especially, I think none more so probably, and you can correct me, but Power Man, like really, you know, Luke Cage and the way he looked with the yellow shirt down, and you could see his chest down the middle, and you know, it was just very stereotypical. So
it was.
Yeah.
Having dressed as Luke Cage several times and probably planning it again this year. Looking at those old episodes is kind of like the Disco Slave. It's right there.
Disco Slave. Whoa! I'm gonna put that on a shirt.
The first issue of the X-Men was 1963.
63. Okay,
Yeah.
further back.
Black Panther was 66.
Black Panther 66.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we like, or at least when I've heard people make the comparison between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, I think it's like that is an easy way in to be like, this is us taking something to like the nth degree, because there are so many differences actually between Martin Luther King and the way Professor X is portrayed as Malcolm X and Magneto. Like Magneto, like, you know, it's like thinking about like Black people first. Like Magneto is about everyone else being destroyed for the sake of him. That's like taking something that's first to like an extreme. Like Malcolm X was not about that. He was not like about like kill all the white people. Like it was.
Though
Just,
you
like,
would think that's what white people think.
Yeah,
of
exactly.
Malcolm
That
X.
was yes. This is just it's an extreme moniker to be like, this is how we can attach your way into it.
Right.
When people have thought about like for the future, like someone bringing up like Morgan Freeman and or Denzel Washington of doing like some future X-Men movie, I'd be down for that. I'd be down for that. That would be great. And like, has anyone here read Ultimate X-Men at all?
Ultimate X-Men is the new one, right? The new.
Like it came out the same way, like with Ultimate Spider-Man, like before they became up with Miles Morales, like the whole Ultimate X, like all the Ultimate.
So probably
like,
early 2000s.
That was that before? That's not part of the Ultimate Universe, is it?
No, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, like
I mean, because the Ultimate Universe has been around for a while now.
But
but they ended it with Cataclysm.
Okay, because isn't that where the Black Nick Fury comes from? The Ultimate Universe.
Yes,
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So he crossed over into mainstream.
They crossed him over. They crossed Miles over. But like with the Ultimate X-Men, they like it's when they're talking about like race, they make it clear. Like it's like they even take like quotations from like things that Black people have said and put in like mouths of mutants. Like there's this whole thing like where they're trying to like, we're not trying to, I don't know, make people
We're,
debate. We're just like, this is what
we're,
it is. This is what we're talking about.
we're not hinting at it. It's not
Yeah.
subliminal.
Right.
It's liminal.
It's not
It's
I
coming out.
think, yeah, I remember when we interviewed Kwanzaa, his point was that he thinks that Stan Lee and company just kind of jumped on the acknowledgement of the hints and the comparisons as opposed to that being their original intention.
Yeah.
He doesn't believe that their original intention, which I'll probably agree with, because what these are for the most part all white and some Jewish members of the original creators of these teams. Their alignment was more along those lines as opposed to along ethnic, racial, Black identity specifically.
Totally.
Right. As a
It
matter
totally
of fact,
sounds like a
think that-
retcon.
I think as they talked about it, there were a lot more comparisons to, was it Menachem Begin and David Ben Gurion, who were very different
That's
versions
wild.
of Jewish, right? But at the same
Wow.
time being an oppressed minority. So it's
Right.
it's one of those things, is that for any, in my opinion, any group that's looking for a way out, there's always that path of, you hit me, I'll put you in the cemetery, or we're trying to work alongside peacefully. And it's always, it's one of those things. I don't know if any of you feel it, where you always wonder, well, what if? Like, we're doing what if about comic books, but what if the civil rights movement had gotten a stronger foothold in the South with a more militant message? What would today look like? Right? Because of course, being in Atlanta, shoot, they ain't want to turn the other cheek. I'm fortunately a generation behind, but when I was reading, about Malcolm X and the autobiography, most of which you didn't see as much down here, it made a whole lot of sense to me.
I mean, I'm 30 years old now, but it took me a long time to actually watch the Malcolm X movie with Denzel Washington. And I think it was one of my pandemic watches. I was like, well, I have time, so here's 3 hours. And I was like, it reminded me, which I guess I would have to say, since it came out first, that Judas and the Black Messiah would actually have to remind me of Malcolm X. But there were a lot of similarities in the storytelling, and I just thought there was such a clarity of thought and understanding as to who Malcolm X was as a person, who he was as a family man, what mattered to him, and how he grew as a person. And I think that in the context of comic books, it's really hard sometimes to have those nuances. And Magneto, as much as I think what's his name, Michael Fassbender's portrayal of Magneto in I will always call it the Days of Future Past saga, whatever. But his portrayal in that first class was so nuanced and so was, I think, the first time that I was like, oh, I get Magneto now. Like I really, I could see the hurt and what he went through in the Holocaust. It was really, really well done. But for the most part, it's like Magneto bad, Professor X good, and Professor X kind of becomes a combination of things because he's fighting for, a peaceful place where mutants can coexist, but also because he happens to be a wheelchair user. There's this kind of stereotype of the saint that I've never noticed, but my friend who is a wheelchair user has noticed in comic books, when they give a character a disability, they're either a straight up villain, they're trying to hurt people to get the thing that they want, to make sure that they don't have their disability ever again. Morbius comes to mind. The Lizard comes to mind.
Glassman.
Who did you say?
Glassman, the Samuel Jackson.
From
Invincible.
Yeah. Which I haven't seen. I haven't seen Glass. But watching what's
you seen
the first
Split?
movie? What was the first one?
I did see
Unbreakable, then Split, and then Glass. But yeah, it's that did not occur to me. I mean, the saint with the disability thing,
Yeah, because it's one or the other. It's like, oh, they're like the end all be all to what we should be as a human being, or they're a despicable creature that's just trying to get something out of the rest of us who are able-bodied, and
Takes
yada
away the
yada yada.
complexity.
That is
But now
interesting.
here's
They-
but
That's
now let me
interesting.
throw this ball out here as the contrast
Mhm.
in the minority majority struggle when it comes to mutants, you know, with whether it's their Malcolm X or Martin Luther King. Quick, name 5 Black mutants.
I mean,
Um,
besides
Say Storm first.
Yeah, that's one.
Sunfire. That's Sunfire. That's Sunfire. What's that guy from the New Mutants? The guy from Brazil.
Okay, I'll give you Roberto da Costa. That's Sunspot. He get real black.
Thank
He
you.
get blacky black.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Sunspot. It's been a while.
What's
It's been a while for me.
Is that character's name Spike?
oh yeah, Spike
Well,
from
Right?
from
He's
the-
Aurora's nephew in the context
Aurora
of.
Storm.
No, I
she's
just
number
said that.
one.
We
She's
said
number
that.
one.
Storm
He's,
was
she's
the
she's
number
the
one.
most lasting enduring. So
He thought he was adding an extra one by calling him my real name.
Wait, I got Storm and Oruru. Wait, speaking of Storm and
But I
Oruru, can you
think-
see her in
but
the
I think-
background there in my office? She's
But I
right, she's
think-
right over my shoulder at all times. I know.
I think a lot of the Black Mutants were the reason why we're having trouble naming them. A lot of them were what were they called again?
the
The
Morlocks.
ones, the Morlocks, the one that were in
Lived
the
in the
sewers and
sewers?
hiding out. Yeah, those were more. They were more black, but they were deformed, so you couldn't really tell that they were black, right? But you know that some of them, probably more of them, were black.
So I get
Right,
I
so-
got Bishop is one more.
Oh, yeah.
Bishop. Oh, okay.
And I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah,
before
Bishop.
it became to that.
But this
that
is
thing,
my point though. That's the controversy. It's like for all of this language, dialogue, and tension to be about the minority struggle, even when they came back with the new all diverse uncanny X-Men.
Mhm.
I mean, you got the nerve to have the difference between an Irishman and a regular white blonde dude.
Really? That's funny.
Listen, I'm
Still
always
no,
gonna
still
think
no
of
black
Nightcrawler.
X-Men, right?
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
good.
What'd you say, Jamal?
I'm always gonna think of Nightcrawler and Colossus as black. I don't care what nobody says.
Definitely.
Colossus is Russian.
I know.
Like, and I know there are black Russians, but
Because he looks like
Have you
Power
seen-
Man. Is
have
that
you
why?
seen his haircut?
Oh, that's white. That's a white man.
Well, have you seen his haircut?
Because he looks like
That,
Power Man.
that man looks like
Nightcrawler
white.
did have that curly.
He's got
he
the
did-
Dolph
he did-
Lundgren
yeah.
haircut.
Give him a haircut, I'll be like, that's a black man.
You
That's
see-
Colossus.
You know,
But Nightcrawler, it is interesting to me that Nightcrawler, I was looking up Nightcrawler a couple weeks ago for whatever reason. It is interesting to me that when Nightcrawler has his little thing that can give the holographic image of him being human, that it is a white person. Meanwhile, he's like literally the son of a blue person and a
White person.
a red person who is a demon. Like it literally makes no sense. But
It's
except for
a
the fact,
default.
right?
It's a
the
default.
exactly.
Exactly. It's a default
Mhm.
because he's
That's-
I always looked at Mystique and his father. I forgot who he was when I found out who his
Azazel.
father was. Right. I felt they were white, even though they were blue and red. They never read to me as anything else.
Mhm.
Well, Mystique,
Okay, now
sure,
that-
but
now that we're
Azazel
on
is
these
like
numbers,
a demon, straight up.
I think we might
Right, but
be
they
able
don't
to come
read as
up with
anything
more-
else. You know how you read
Oh.
into a character. They don't
Sure.
read as anything else. Yeah.
Sure.
Now
What
I
are you
think
saying,
we're at
Rich?
the exact same number count of blue mutants as black mutants.
I'm dead.
I
But that's
think
probably true.
Because I think if you run by Mystique, Nightcrawler, and Beast, I'm calling him blue once he grew blue fur. He was white.
Yeah.
before, but then
They
he
probably
was blue.
outnumber the black.
I'm dead. The ones you can name off the top of your head, yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
Does it ever bother anybody else that like the mutants are hated by people? But it's like, how did people ever find out they were mutants? Like
Well-
like did people think Spider-Man was a mutant? Did people think
What's
They
the
did.
difference?
I think they did.
Yeah.
They did
Really?
think Spider-Man was a mutant at one point. Yeah.
because if I was a mutant, I'd keep
I
that
think
on
they
the
tried to
DL.
recruit him.
Well,
did
the
they?
thing is like it's about this is more of like a cultural shift, okay? Which is where like Marvel in itself will probably get into trouble, which is why they've probably taken a long time to like figure out how to approach the X-Men. Like With the
Well,
other
that's a whole other
superheroes,
thing, but yeah,
it
continue.
is. It's like with the culture of like race, where we're not having to deal with like someone hating on you based on you having a power. Like approaching all of their movies, being like, there's enough audience interaction where they're like, oh yeah, champion that hero, champion that hero, champion that hero. Like because Marvel so much has had like people championing their hero, and no one's really like going around saying like, ooh, that person's terrible, we're gonna hate on them. Like they don't really have any movies that deal with that subject. It's going to be a little weird for the X-Men to come across and being like, oh, we all have all these powers, let's hate on them, when they're not doing that with other franchises. Like it's weird to have that like
But
dichotomy there,
the
you know?
thing with mutants, but the difference between mutants and almost anybody else in Marvel or in comic books is that they have a genome that
Hmm.
is different from other
That's
people. It is not Thor is a god. Spider-Man got bit by something.
I know. I'd be like, damn, you got bit by a spider. Get away from me. Like,
Is it contagious?
how you
But
know that?
I can
but
see.
but in the way that we are talking about race and the correlation to the X-Men, you know, they're like people think that they can catch it at any moment. Like I think of South Africa. I think of South Africa and apartheid because literally if you give birth to if back in your lineage if some what they called colored people in South Africa, which were mixed race from like various ethnic backgrounds, to the point that they were so watered down that they could potentially pass. And if you could pass for white, great. But if back in that lineage, eventually your child has even a hint of Negro in them, then that child and therefore your family is completely out. And so people feared constantly that they would birth a child, or that something about, you know, the kink of their hair would do something crazy one day and they would be considered and labeled black. So I would see it as actually more closer related to apartheid than I would to American
So if I could,
Do you
racism.
think that they'll still approach it that way though?
I think I'm curious how they're going to approach it, because there's like just the multiverse of it all is just very complicated. But and how they've had to navigate. Like again, Disney did not have the rights to the word mutant until
Yeah.
3-4 years
10
ago.
minutes ago.
Yeah.
And
so
it's
it's a fear. It's a fear of miscegenation.
yes, I think so. I think like, you know, it's kind of like a purity
It's
thing.
deep. It's deep.
I think that's kind of where it comes from, the fear and the hatred. And I think that because if you have a child with a mutant, is your child going to be a mutant, and da 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 da, and you don't know the details of all of that, so that's scary, because then you're worried that your child is going to be maligned, and do you want to deal with that? Yes, it is about miscegenation at the end of the day. And for those of you who did not know what miscegenation is, it is because it is a big SAT word. But the technical definition, hold on, I'm looking at the actual definition so I don't say it incorrectly. It is the interbreeding of people considered to be of different racial types. That is the actual
Textbook
definition.
definition.
So so a couple of things, and one of them is going to be the Eternals movie, but I want to go back to that in a second. But matter of fact, let me tackle that first, because my other thought is kind of leaving me. But with the Eternals, I think that might the Eternals, I think between that and the Multiverse of Madness, um I think the emergence of that celestial that they basically killed by stopping its birth, um that could be a catalyst, because the celestials ultimately are responsible for mutants, right? They are, because in the comic books they're responsible for the Kree. The Kree
Mm.
are responsible for creating like the Inhumans and Eternal, you know, all that kind of stuff. They're all kind of mixed in, and so the emergence of that celestial could be a catalyst to awaken the dormant genes, because it was part of that celestial was part of Earth, right? And so it could be in every human, but only some more dominant than others. And so the partial birth of that celestial could bring about the spark that starts
Enough
those people's
cosmic
powers. Yeah,
energy, or yeah.
it could.
You know, it actually reminds me of Avatar, and then I'll let Sheridan speak, because I know you had something to say. But it reminds me of Avatar, The Last Airbender, but of Korra, actually, because in Korra there were, like, you know, they were looking for more airbenders and yada yada yada. They had like, it was basically a lost art form. And then all of a sudden, I'm trying to remember, they opened like some plane of the spirit world, and all of a sudden all of these airbenders started existing, and all these people who didn't realize that they were actually airbenders started having powers. And so it completely revitalized the airbending nation. And what you said just reminded me of that. So I think that that's very much possible, because the cosmic energy of a celestial being born has to do something
Yeah.
to the rest of the world. But Sheridan, what were you going to say?
I feel like every time I have a thought, we move so fast, I can't get to it. This is going back to
Oh, yeah, no worries.
what the X-Men, the idea of the people like hating the X-Men and figuring out the difference between the superheroes and the X-Men is the idea of supremacy, like the DNA supremacy, right? I mean, it's the thing that white supremacists are afraid of, like, oh, our race is going to be taken out. So the idea that these people with superhuman abilities they're born with it. And so there's that difference right there. They were born with it, kind of like what you were saying earlier. They weren't acquired. They were born with it, and that can instill a sense of fear in regular people, because it's like, how dare,
Can I say, Sheridan,
Mhm.
that is the thought that trailed out of my head. That's exactly the thought. That's what I was going to say. So thank you
But,
for
Of
that.
but
course.
what if your radioactive daddy lays down with your normal mama?
Stop.
Like like
Hey.
like aren't is there gonna be a chance you might be a mutant? Like
And
Of course
that
you are.
brings you
pass
to the other
on.
question. Yeah, like, are mutants being created by these super people who weren't mutants before? Like, there's a
Is it a
whole
recessive gene? Is it there's a whole, like, I'm sure, I know they talk about it ad nauseum in
because
various iterations about
I
what
guess that's
those
what they
genes
ended
are.
up deciding about. Like Franklin Richards, for example, is considered a mutant.
Oh,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, I mean, and it's here's another thing just to think about with each of these, because one of the things that I really admire is the evolution of the branding of the villains. Meaning, at one point, Magneto was definitely bad because
He's just
his
a bad guy.
team was the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So,
Mhm.
as a child, you know that you're supposed to be against evil, but then over time they became the Brotherhood. Their goals weren't necessarily as misaligned, and just that idea, because it is, for most mutants, is not obviously visible that they're mutants. So even the idea of a protest, of an anti-mutant protest, I'd just be one of, what do they call it? They used to call it passing. If you
Yeah.
were of some black ancestry, but you could look like white people, I think I might be one of them passing mutants. Just, hey, no, I can't turn into
Right.
Whereas the
And
Morlocks
until
couldn't.
I need to.
Whereas
right.
the Morlocks couldn't. The Morlocks were
Yeah.
representative of, I guess, and that's why to me the Morlocks were more black, because they couldn't hide, they couldn't change their skin, they couldn't change their deformities or whatever it was.
Right.
So, they were
Right.
obviously mutants.
Right. And then unless the X-Men are wearing their costume, for the most part, you don't know.
Yeah.
And for the most part, they keep it a secret. Like
Mhm.
in certain contexts, at least, they keep it a secret. In that article that Rich shared with me, they talked about passing, and talked about there was I'm trying to remember exactly which mutant it was, but it was a First Nations indigenous young lady who was nailing Scott for basically throwing away other members of the X-Men who have died in the battle for what they're fighting for, et cetera, et cetera. And he was like, well, they were soldiers in a battle. They knew what they signed up for. And she said, yeah, for you lost soldiers. I lost brothers and sisters.
Was that wasn't Danny Moonstar? Was that who that was?
I can't remember. I'm trying to. My phone is so busted right now. I wish
Moonstar, is that Moonstar?
Just throw it on the ground. That's what.
And just throw it on the ground and start over. That's how I feel right now. But the original might have been Danny Moonstar. Hold on a second. I'm going to do it this way.
Now I'm
but
really
someone else.
interested. And
Yeah.
if anyone who wants to read the Ultimate X-Men line, like I read all of it. I finished all of that line about like 2 weeks ago, and I'm really interested if anyone ever wants to read those comic
Is
books.
it in the app?
Is what in the app?
It should be. It should.
Is the
They should
Ultimate
all
X-Men
be
in
in
the
the
app?
app.
Oh.
Yeah, they
Like,
should all.
well,
be in the app.
I either have to
Marvel
thank
Comics
or
app.
curse you guys for introducing me to the app, because now it's
Ah!
like I had, you know, once the thing about comic books when you buy them is once you've read them, they're over.
Right.
And you have to go and acquire new comic books.
Yeah.
Now you just click to the next thing, and suddenly an hour's gone. But I know, yeah. So.
Yeah, they
Oh,
should all
I
be in
found
that
it.
app.
I
They should
found
all-
it. It was, yeah, you're right. It's Danny Moonstar. Because what she says to Scott exactly is he says to her, that's what you think this is about? Who could pass for human? You think I planned this? You think I wouldn't trade my life to bring any of them back right now? And she responds, you know, I know you would, but that's not always an option. It's always been the Scott Summers story, or the Scott and Jean story, or Scott and Logan. We all thought you were leading us to safety, fighting to help us all survive, but really we were just the supporting cast to get you here, weren't we?
Wow.
So, and she completely nailed him, and in true white people fashion, he just doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. His only marginalization is his mutant nature, but other than that, he is a white cis man.
Yep.
His general life is not hindered by how he appears.
Just
Other
gotta wear
than
sunglasses
other than
at
his
night.
ruby quartz glasses.
No,
That's
no,
about
right.
it.
Which just look really cool. Like he just looks
Right?
like a cool biker dude. Like
Yeah, but you gotta
Just
you gotta,
don't
you
knock
gotta,
off his
you gotta-
glasses.
you
You're
gotta
okay.
give credit where credit's due. I would go crazy if everything I saw was red. I'll tell you that right now. I would go crazy if everything I saw was red. I'd be like,
Well,
I
if
in a China shop.
well, I guess I guess for him, because he had the experience, because it doesn't really hit until puberty, right? And that's when your powers start to emerge. So he
Right.
saw, if he was born seeing red, then it would be no difference. But he experienced life in all its colors, so
Yeah.
that was the difference.
Guys, speaking of Seeing Red, if anyone hasn't seen Seeing Red
Turning-
on Disney Plus,
Turning Red?
Turning
Turning
Red,
Red.
go watch
Turning
it. Go watch it.
I'm on that train. I just watched Encanto and Soul in like the span of 2 days, and I'd never seen either of them.
Oh, you haven't seen Soul yet?
No,
You
I
must-
hadn't, because I don't know why I hadn't seen it before. Like, I think I was busy doing something when it premiered, and then
It was the pandemic. What were you doing?
I don't know.
I'm gonna tell you.
No,
Hold on a second. Sheridan, go.
I put off watching Soul because I knew it was gonna make me cry. So
I was a little bit late to the table on Soul too, but Encanto, my daughters insisted, and then I just keep walking around talking about we don't talk about.
Yes. Oh,
Bruno."
gosh.
Yeah,
it's a great. The song is good. I just hear it all the time. I have
I know.
an 8 and 5-year-old, and they
No,
just,
she's 9 now.
Oh yes. Oh,
Oh,
I
my
know,
daughters
the other day.
I'm sorry.
My
can I
daughters
say-
are
can
grown,
I-
but they still insisted that I see it, and I'm very pleased with them for
Can
making
I,
this. Making
can I
What are you
say
saying,
the,
Omar?
can I say the other day, I was telling my daughter, because I was like, you get a party at 10 years old. I said, but that we have 2 years to plan for that. And I was like, she's turning 9, so it's only 1 year. I put my hand in my head. I was like, oh my God. I just had to say that.
Math be mathing.
Yeah.
Double digits.
But go ahead. Yeah.
On the way.
But yeah, but it's interesting. It is interesting. Speaking of the puberty aspect of it, because when puberty hits, that's kind of when the mutation begins. Although Kurt Wagner was born the way that he was born, but that's because of that demon part.
But thank goodness he didn't, that it did emerge at puberty, right? Because imagine he'd be like the baby in The Boys with the laser eyes. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
So then,
Nightmare.
and you can't put glasses on a baby. You'd have to,
Just be like,
strap
just
something
close your
on.
eyes.
Baby
That's
name
what they
goggles.
put goggles on baby, right? Babies.
Yeah, they're like got bands. It's like
We'll
a
get some
like a
editor
headband
stuff and
for
just
the
throw this
eye.
baby over the
Um,
cliff and be
but
done.
I think-
But I guess, but in
I-
that reinvention, that's something else to think about, is that, the whole teenage emergence, it made it also a requirement that there were always more new mutants, because at the same time, you got to look at the demographic that they sell
Right.
to. Is that, it's relatable. Is why Peter Parker stays a teenager. At least, the New Mutants and the X-Men, they have the option of growing new people into the cast. I'm just still critically observant of how infrequently a black dude rolls into the X-Men cast.
Mm.
You know,
It's like the part of
Even
it
when
is
they
I'm
have
looking for
writers of color, I wonder what that's about. I'd be curious to like look deeper into that.
Sunspots.
I have a conspiracy theory, and that is, well, we want people to empathize with people who are different,
Mm,
but we can't make them look too different. But
yeah.
like, having too many
well,
black people might make it too on the nose, and we want white people to empathize.
Sheridan, I
But
think you and
meanwhile,
I
there's
are
so
kind of here today.
Mhm.
I did want to say something, but go ahead, Zuri.
No, just meanwhile, there are so many white people. If you told people that X-Men was an allegory for race relations at all, there are so many white fanboys who are like, no, it's not. What are you talking about? They could have so much empathy for Scott Summers and Jean Grey and all these other people and even Storm, and they still would be like, no,
Well,
what?
that
Nothing's wrong.
exactly. So springboarding off of both you two, I mean, and this goes beyond comics. It's in all forms of media, right? So
Hmm.
in comics we have X-Men and similar type groups. In movies we have Avatar. We have what happened in Star Wars with how Palpatine came to power. Like all the different things that represent the struggles that we actually face in real life, and that people just kind of they feel that empathy, right, for the media or within the media that they're consuming, but it does not apply to their real life. And
Yes.
it's just it's mind-blowing though.
It's a
It really
cognitive
is.
dissonance that
Yes.
I understand because it's built into the fabric of our society. Like I get why it exists, but it pisses me off every time I think about it
Yeah, I get
because
pissed off too. It
because
does.
it's so clear. It's so clear to us. Like we
Mhm.
see it. And that's
it's
by,
not.
of course, by product of us experiencing it from the other side of it. We see microaggressions. We understand those. But when you try to explain a microaggression to a white person or someone who is not marginalized in whatever way, they're just like, what? Huh? No, you're fine. But no, what are you talking about? Women have it easier than men, and everything's fine, and blah 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 blah. And actually, did you know? And I'm like, what? Do you know the history of the world? Like
Mhm.
just of the world in general. So it's very frustrating. But I think kind of circling back to the puberty aspect of it before I forget this thought again, it- you know, it's kind of like the same idea behind like when black babies are babies, people are like, oh, they're so cute, they're beautiful, etc etc etc. But when they become young ladies and young men, then that's
Right.
when society's opinion of their cuteness or whatever changes. Like you'll see a 12-year-old, you'll see a Tamir Rice and be, or 11-year-old, and you'll see Tamir Rice and see them as a threat, as opposed to the child that I know them to be. I was a very tall girl for a long time. Like I was 5'5" when I was like in what grade was that, fourth or fifth grade, something like that.
Mm.
So I was tall, and I would get mistaken for 18, 19, 20 for a long time. And then all of a sudden I grew up, and then an older woman thought I was 13, an older black woman, to be fair. But like she was like, what are you, 13? And I said, I am 23 years old, so thank you,
Wow.
but no. But it is I think it directly correlates to that aspect of the race talk, as it were, because people like to, we become a threat once hormones are involved for whatever reason. Either we're going to take your daughters or your men or whatever, and we're going to create havoc and chaos, and that's what they see us as.
Yep. Black kids aren't allowed to come of age. We're not allowed to have a coming of age story.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's and it's ironic. Like as you were saying it, I was thinking of even like when I saw the Michael Jackson show, like that part of transition of his life from where he went from cute Michael Jackson to kind of the self-hate era of what do I do? I'm not adorable anymore. But it's but
yeah.
Oh, I think I had my finger. This is my reminder. Remind yourself if you're holding a point while someone else is talking. Cloak.
Touch your nose, everyone. That's
we now
right.
have 4 Black Mutants. Cloak 4. From Cloak and Dagger. Okay.
Sure.
But especially. Oh, go ahead.
is because they had an was he born that way? I thought it was an accident. Or maybe I'm just thinking of the TV series. I don't know. But
In the
either
comic
way,
books, they're mutants. Like the drug addiction came
okay.
later for
Gotcha.
them, but
Heard.
they were.
We had Jay Holtham on, so I watched the series, and so my thought process around Cloak and Dagger is different. But yes, heard Cloak.
And I have not watched the series yet. I feel so guilty. I get like fiction guilt.
But I have
hanging out now, like because I collected their whole mini series like when it came out, because they weren't built to be a permanent comic when they were first introduced.
I have a potential fifth. That was Cloak was in number 4.
Yeah.
Cloak is our 4.
Okay, so a potential fifth is Blade.
Okay.
He was born.
Mutant vampire?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was born with the powers.
Yeah.
So
He was born half
question: what can so okay?
I'll-
How do we consider vampires in general? And because I don't know, are we considering, because the mutant gene seems to be a different thing than Blade being born a half vampire.
Yeah, I was like,
Well,
I don't know if I see them
that
as-
question.
as-
No, but that question goes back to what you said earlier about Franklin Richards. His parents were normal, and they got hit with cosmic radiation and had a baby, and he's a mutant. So mutant has become, if you are born with powers, because now it is a part of your genome and you can pass that on from generation to generation from that point, just the same way celestials kind of mess with humanity back in the day. In the primordial ooze or whatever, I guess it was not originally where humans would have had the mutant genome until they were messed with by celestials. So at some point somebody has to be messed with in order to get to be able to have the ability and pass it down. So ergo Blade
But
kind of is a mutant.
so would
Did
he
you
be the
say
first?
ergo?
I said that.
So if I'm following this train of thought, though, he would be the first mutant in a line, not his mother was not the mutant.
No,
Right.
that's correct.
So
And
he
neither
would be the
are
first.
the Richards, their parents.
Yes.
Franklin Richards.
So
They were
so
first.
they would be he would be the first in a line of.
Yeah,
That's
there we
correct.
go.
Now,
I don't know if
and
he
I
can
guess-
procreate though. I don't know if he can procreate though. I don't know.
I
if
don't know if
that's-
he wants to even test it because he
Yeah, yeah.
he
But
wants to die. So
but I think because he's born that way, but then again, like you said, right? Because if there are, I haven't read that deeply into like a lot of Blade comics, but any pure blood vampires, and I'm going by the movies here, right?
Correct.
So any pure blood vampires, they're not considered mutants; they're vampires. But again, there are no other superpowered beings in that universe if it's just the Blade universe. So there's nothing really to compare it to.
No.
But so that it's just a whole other thought process
But
because he
then-
is superpowered and he can pass as human. He can walk in the daylight. He doesn't have to show his fangs, he can live with extended life, right? So
does that make him a mutant of vampires?
that's a question. That's a real. That's why I said it's debatable.
Does he go into Homo superior genus species, or is he like Homo vampirus? Like we got to make up some more Latin for him. Like,
that's a good. I think that's a really good one.
I mean, the way that they talk about it in the movies, at least, is that like, or from what I recall, it's that he's like a superior kind of vampire, that he's able to walk in the daytime. He doesn't have to drink as much blood. It's not like he can do yada, 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 yada.
Yeah.
So, and they tried to take his blood in order to figure out a way that they can also walk in the daytime, but then completely just terrorize humans for millennia. So I think he would be like superior vampire. Like I think he's like the next evolution of a vampire as opposed to the next evolution of a human being.
So would that so what would make, for instance, right? So a vampire, it's turned by getting bitten by another vampire and then whatever the process is, right?
Right.
So Spider-Man got bit, but by a spider. And then if he has a baby, that baby is going to have powers. So would that baby not be a mutant at that point? Same as Franklin Richards. And so, like, I just think we should vote on it.
That storyline has that. Like,
I say he's a
there's
mutant.
I mean,
been a
but it
little
starts to
bit
sound like
he
that.
has a daughter.
What do you call it? It's like the election where you're draft picks for black people. So
Oh yeah, the black delegation.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, I feel like
you want to trade in and out. Yeah.
Black delegation accepts Nightcrawler.
For shizzle.
there was
For shizzle.
a small, I can't remember when it was done. I think it was like maybe 5 years ago, but they had a little mini series of where, like, because they were talking about like Brand New Day or One New Day or whatever what happened with Spider-Man, but like if they did not break up Mary Jane Watson and Spider-Man when he was in his 30s, they had a storyline where they followed them without making this deal with Mephisto and whatever that storyline is called. But they had a storyline where he was with Mary Jane and they had a daughter who did have spider powers. But the daughter was not classified as a mutant. They didn't call it as a mutant. I think that there's validity to that conversation, but I think that they also went through that in that storyline and they decided not to do that. I think they just had her as a super powered individual.
They talked about whether or not she was a mutant, or they just never addressed it.
They, like I think both of them were talking about, like Peter and Mary Jane were talking about them like as her father. Like they had
you're
that
saying
conversation.
the two of them decided. Oh, that doesn't count. That's parents deciding. Yeah, she's not a mutant. She's a mutant. No, that doesn't
but like
count.
Peter's a genius. Peter understands.
Because then that undercuts everything that we know about mutants, right? That undercuts all the other stories about people who were born from again, Franklin Richards and others who were born from people with powers, who developed powers through other means. So it kind of, and the reason is, and here's the thing, right? The reason for mutants having the ability, or for second generation mutants, which were, let's say, Franklin Richards' parents, the reason for that is because mainly why humans at all can even retain powers is because of what happened with the Celestials. So all the spider bites and all that kind of stuff, if Celestials had never done that, humans would never be able to retain a power. It's like activating a mutant gene later on in life. That's really what it is.
Well, but the spider bite was man-made.
Man-made.
No,
right. No, I get it.
Like the genome is not. That's not man-made.
No, what I'm saying is that some people have it where they emerge at puberty. Some humans who have it are asymptomatic or whatever you want to call it. They don't show it, and they never will unless they're introduced with a certain substance or some kind of a bite or something like that. Now, and going back to Blade really quick before I forget, because I know I will, is that I will say Blade is not a vampire if in the comics being a vampire is purely supernatural. If it's supernatural, I'll concede. But if it's not, if it's scientific, then I say he's a mutant.
Sure, I'd agree with that.
But isn't supernatural science we don't understand yet?
That's what they say. But I like to believe in math, even though I do like the correlation. I do like it, but I also like the separation at the same time. So I'm conflicted on that. I like magic to be magic.
Magic is magic, and magic must defeat magic. But that's what I was thinking about. In talking to Kwanzaa Osajefo about his series Black, which is becoming a movie now, which is really exciting. I'm trying to be in that movie.
Make room.
But for those of you who weren't able to listen to our interview or be a part of our interview with Kwanzaa, Black imagines a world where only Black people have superpowers. And it's a small percentage. And from what I can tell, I have to read it again because I haven't read it in a couple months. But from what I recall, it's usually some kind of traumatic event that is the impetus behind bringing up their powers. So the main character is involved in a police shooting, and he just doesn't die.
Killmonger's perfect world. Go ahead.
Basically. There's some other examples of some lynching that happens in the South, and the dude doesn't die, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the trauma is what ends up bringing out the powers in those people. And what I think Kwanzaa, based on the conversation we had with him, he was so tired of the X-Men. He loves X-Men, don't get him wrong, but he was tired of the comparison with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and all that stuff. So he was like, let's just make everybody in this world, it's about Black people having superpowers and the reaction to Black people having superpowers and white people trying to get a piece of that, basically, and figuring out how they can use it to their advantage, which is what white people do. Sorry, white people. That's what
I love the idea of that movie. I love like the premise as you describe it. It just makes me think of Lovecraft Country and where they were going with it, and it's just like
because that got canceled, right?
Yep.
It did.
Yeah, it did get canceled. I still haven't finished it because I was freaking out too much when I saw that episode where she was like transforming into the white lady. I was like, I'm nervous. I'm so nervous.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, it goes somewhere. It goes. You okay? I'm sorry.
I mean,
So
no, I'll get there, but like I needed a
when you
break,
get
which
there,
has
you'll
been like
see what
a
I'm
year.
talking about. I'm not going to talk
so
about it, but
good.
when you get there and the final episode, you'll see what I'm talking about, where they were going with it, and what it could have been. And I listen. I still feel that's why it got canceled, but
I'm like, I
I
was
digress.
I was intrigued with this choice. And
Or-
then it ended, and I was like, this is stupid. Of all the shows, I don't need more Emily in Paris. You can just give me more of this Lovecraft Country,
Oh
please.
wow!
There you go.
Yes.
Oh wow!
I
But-
don't. There's some like there's something you know that there's some shows where you're like, why are these around over new
make it.
things that take new ideas? You know that they no.
Well,
No.
the concept of race and superheroes in general is just something that's very fascinating because by nature of the history, let's talk about just Western society and specifically America, of course, since we all have been born and raised here. But it's like there's a cognitive dissonance in exploring certain aspects of it that some franchises do a better job of than others. Some don't do it at all. And exploring the what if of it all. And I really am interested in what if the cartoon series is going to like keep doing as it progresses. I liked what they did so far. I know they had some COVID stoppages that prevented them from telling the complete story as they wanted to tell it. But, I think race and superheroes is something that just deserves a lot more. Stop it. But it's true. Wait, so wait, in the chat, someone started talking about name a Black speedster.
Oh,
and
in the Flash, they have one.
Yeah,
they
have a black
they
one
do,
there.
but they do
On
but
the
it-
TV show?
Yeah.
Yeah, on the TV show.
I
but
waited
it-
50 years for that to happen.
but it's crazy to me because I made a comparison on the podcast's Instagram. I made a whole thing for Black History Month for Jesse Owens. And I think it's crazy that Jesse Owens was the fastest man in the world. And then of course you have many other Black people who have followed in his footsteps. And to not have had a Black speedster be like a prominent thing is kind of crazy.
Barry Arian.
I think
Barry
doing that
Allen.
On purpose.
I think doing
On
that in the
purpose.
comics because Wally in the comics obviously is not Black, right? So
Oh,
doing
that's
that.
right. Wally on the show is Black. That's right.
Wally in the show is Black, and it was just a way for them to add a little bit more color into the show.
Right. Which they already had done so much.
Yeah,
of.
they had done, but it was just another way for them to do that. And
They were just like, let's
it
have
worked.
at least
It
someone
worked for
with
the
some
show.
powers.
No, it worked for the show. It's fine. And then not only that, they had their child. Their child, and even Iris for a short time had a little bit of power, as far as I remember, because I had to stop watching that show. I was like,
That's fair. I stopped watching it after 3 episodes, so
I stuck it out for about 5 seasons.
I just don't pay
Yeah.
attention to that universe anymore. I just don't.
Yeah,
I
I cut off the CW. But Superman. I'm sorry to go off track, but yeah, Superman
No,
and
it's
Lois is
fine.
actually not bad. It's pretty good.
no, I've heard that show's
I
good.
like that
I've
show.
heard that show's good.
It's really good and it's weird because
Yeah.
I think this is the first time I've seen Superman be short. That dude.
Yeah.
My friend keeps
He's not
pointing out
bad,
his
but-
my friend keeps pointing out his baggy suit, and
And
he
I
made me
guess
notice it. he made me notice it. I mean, Tyler Hoechlin, he is chiseled, right? But
Yep.
his suit is a muscle looking suit, and I didn't pay attention to the baggy suit. My friend, he pointed it out, so now I see it's a baggy suit, and I'm like, oh man, you can see all the wrinkles where it's supposed to be muscles. I'm like, come on.
Well,
Oh,
Mari,
but now
Rich's
thinking
daughter,
about
kept
that,
pointing out his teeth. His teeth are messed up. She
Who Tyler
Tyler
Hoechlin?
Hoechlin, like they're not like good teeth. Like,
Good teeth.
and I put
Good
that in
teeth.
quotes, but that's what she said.
Are they
Like she was
weird?
like,
Like if we're a pirate?
they're not great. Like she was like, what, they
I
don't got
got you.
dental
I
on
got you.
Krypton?
They got braces.
Well,
Hey, you know what? Give me that
well,
reality.
the
Give me
problem is
that reality.
he's stuck with the teeth that he was born with, because who's gonna fix his teeth now,
That's what
right?
I said.
right.
But what were you saying, Rich?
No, I was just thinking about it. The twins from Superman and Lois are mutants. Yes,
Mm.
half alien, or are they half alien? What are
I
Well,
they?
think they're just half.
there's no such thing in
This is
DC
true.
Yeah,
Comics.
That's true.
that's
Not
a
in that way.
hybrid.
Mutants are bad in DC Comics. Mutants are
It'd just be like
probably
super
some kind of
powered beings. That's what they would
they're,
call
they're
them.
just metahumans, I guess.
Meta.
Yeah.
Metahumans, yeah.
Mm.
But yeah, so this was an interesting conversation. I know we got off subject, but that happens sometimes. We just are chatting. We're just having fun here.
Having a good time.
I hope everyone had a good time. Can you let us know what your thoughts about race and the X-Men are? What do you think? Can you name more Black mutants? We can't. We're having trouble. Please help us. Please let us know on the podcast IG at Super Black Podcast, or you can talk to us on Twitter at Super Podcast.
All right, everybody. My name is Omar. You can catch me on Twitter at Copyright, or on IG at original with a 0_gamester. And this has been a lot of fun. See you guys.
Hi there. This is Rolls Andre, OG fanboy, he, him pronouns, and actor. Should hit me up. Looking for work. Thank you. I've been reading comics since they were 50 cents. Have a great day.
Hey, this is Richard Harden. My pronouns still he and him. And I am in Atlanta, thinking of which I'm trying to form a Black Justice League. If you have the heart, let me know. We got some things to get going. Find me on Instagram, Richard_Harden. Talk soon.
I'm Sheridan, pronoun she, her, and you can follow me on Instagram for something absolutely not nerdy related at all, food.
Hello, my name is Jamal James, he, him. You can follow me at the Jamal James on Instagram. And yeah, actor, here to do all those Children of Blood and Blown, Black auditions, all those kind of things. Let's go.
And my name is Zuri Washington, she, her pronouns. You can find me on IG at Zuri with a fringe on top. And don't forget to follow us. And also, I made t-shirts. Buy them.
Yeah.
I bought one.
You can't see them if you're on the podcast, but one day when you watch the video, you'll know. And I keep posting about it, so you'll see. Buy a t-shirt, $25, plus shipping and handling. But it was good to have you all on today. And don't forget, should you need heroes, we've got your back. We fear no topic we attack. If conversation is what you lack, you'll find it here with Super Black. Bye.